We're here today with Hank South from our 24/7 Sports Alabama site. Hank is Alabama insider when it comes to not only Alabama recruiting, but Alabama football. And we're going to talk certainly recruiting today with Hank about the Emory Jones situation and more about Ohio State and Alabama recruiting. But before we get to the recruiting part of things, Hank, welcome to the DeanCast today.
Thanks for having me, Bill. Happy to be here.
Let's go ahead and start talking about Alabama, as I mentioned. Right now, they are number 5 in the college football playoff projection. Ohio State, of course, is at number 8. A little bit different for Alabama to be kind of on the outside looking in at number 5. They're pretty much used to controlling their own destiny. So this year's a little different for the Crimson Tide. What's kind of the temperature of things at Alabama as their fans are in the wait-and-see mode, so to speak?
Yeah, it's a lot different than recent years. They've won 3 straight SEC championships coming into this year, so controlled their fate the past 3 years, and obviously are needing some things to happen this go-around. So I would say the temperature it's hot. I mean, there's a little anxiety. There's a few things that have to happen this weekend with the conference championship games. So we'll see. Obviously, Alabama is going to be rooting for Ohio State to beat Wisconsin to open up that spot in the top 4. And then that obviously the debate, and we can talk about between Alabama and Ohio State with a Big Ten champion Ohio State or a one-loss non-conference champion in Alabama. So it's definitely a little bit different than what Alabama fans are used to, especially in the college football playoff era this year.
Well, it's certainly going to be an interesting weekend, and to see how all this plays out. And I guess from an Alabama and Ohio State side, you hope that the committee has some tough decisions to make, because if it's easy, then that's probably not going to bode too well for Ohio State, maybe Alabama as well. But we'll see on that. Let's move to the recruiting part of things now, Hank. There's been a very interesting dynamic between Ohio State and Alabama with the quarterback situation. Ohio State, of course, is going after Emory Jones, in that they're going after him to keep him in the class. He's been committed to Ohio State for quite some time, but he's certainly been involved with Alabama and Auburn. Jarren Williams, who was once committed to Kentucky, made an official visit to Ohio State. He, too, has been involved with Alabama. Matt Corral hasn't been involved much with Ohio State, but has with Alabama. How do you see things from the Alabama side right now, talking about Emory Jones and Jarren Williams?
Yeah, Emory's a guy that they offered in March under their new offensive coordinator, Brian Dable, or first-year offensive coordinator now. He's not new anymore. But he's a guy they really liked. They got him on campus a couple times from the spring and the summer, had him throw for the staff at camp. And ever since then, it's kind of been a push to get Emory Jones in the class and flip him from Ohio State. Jarren Williams has been a guy they really like as well. They were on him in the spring, trying to flip him from Kentucky the first time. And he's a guy they still like, but at this point it's kind of become Emory Jones and then the others. So I actually talked to Jarren Williams' coach recently, and he kind of made it seem like it was going to be Miami or Ohio State at this point. For him, and so we'll see what happens. I know the crystal ball is trending for Miami for Jarren at this point. Alabama still likes him. He's not scheduled to take an official visit at this point to Alabama. We'll see if maybe they make a late run at him. But like you said, they've kind of showed some renewed interest in Matt Corral, who's committed to Florida currently. They got him on an official visit a couple weeks ago for their Mercer game. But as I said earlier, I mean, Emory Jones is the priority right now for Alabama. They would really like to flip him and get him in the class. As you go and as Ohio State fans know, he's not really saying much or doing much recruiting-wise. I mean, he's taking visits, but he's not really commenting on his recruiting much or really making decisions at this point, it appears. I think he's playing out the rest of his high school season with her county, and then after that he's going to look at kind of making that final choice. Obviously, he's still committed to Ohio State, so I think the longer he stays committed to Ohio State, the better it bodes for Ohio State. But I mean, Alabama's right there. They're going to see him this week, and they're really turning up the heat trying to get an answer from him. And as we've reported since the summer on the Alabama side, there has been optimism that he would stay closer to home. He would end up staying closer to home with Alabama, but at the same time we've been saying that, and then he's still committed to Ohio State. So we'll see. You never know what's going through a kid's mind, especially this late in the process when you really do have to make that final decision. So I think after Emory, if he does decide to stay with Ohio State, I think you'll see Alabama make more of a push for Matt Corral and getting him in the class, flipping him from Florida. We'll see. I know Florida's kind of, with Dan Mullen, they've kind of started another go at Justin Fields, who's committed to Georgia, so we'll see what happens with Matt there at this point. But, yeah, I mean, from the Alabama side, it's Emory Jones and then the rest of them. They want to flip him and get him in the class, and I know they feel there is a good chance of doing that.
You know, you mentioned staying closer to home with Emory Jones, and I've talked many times with Emory's coach at Heard County, and the thing that he's always mentioned is that he tends to think that Emory would stay with Ohio State, but that if he didn't, the base reason would ultimately be getting cold feet about going quite so far from home. So I think that's really the biggest dynamic in there. You know, will he get cold feet and want to stay closer to home? My feeling right now is that I slightly favor thinking that Jones will stay with Ohio State. But if he doesn't stay with Ohio State, I think the guy that's most likely, we've talked about Jarren Williams, but I think the guy that's most likely to be the quarterback replacing Emory Jones, if he doesn't stay, is Matthew Baldwin from Texas. And I know you're familiar with Matthew Baldwin. You live kind of a stone's throw away from his high school. Give our Ohio State fans a little glimpse of Matthew Baldwin's school and Matthew.
Yeah, he's a kid that, Lake Travis High School is a quarterback factory. I went to high school at the rival school, Westlake, down the road from Lake Travis. But I can't remember the last year, at least in the past decade, that they haven't had a D1 quarterback. And they haven't had a D1 quarterback that's actually done really well at the D1 level. You can go all the way back to Todd Reesing, the Kansas quarterback that had the Jayhawks number 2, I think, back in 2007 when they were playing Missouri and Kansas were 1 and 2 in that weird college football year. He was there. Garrett Gilbert was there. Obviously, he didn't have that great of a career at Texas, but I know he was the number 1 quarterback in the country in his class. They've had guys like Baker Mayfield, who Ohio State fans are familiar with. They've had guys like Michael Brewer, who was a Virginia Tech quarterback. I think he played when Ohio State played Virginia Tech. I think he was their quarterback. And just the list goes on. They've always had really good offenses, high-powered offenses. They've won multiple state championships in a row. So, there really hasn't been a non-success story coming out of there at the quarterback position. And to be honest, I haven't seen too much of Matthew Baldwin yet. Obviously his name goes. People know about him in the area, and he's put up good numbers this year. And Lake Travis is on another state championship path. But yeah, if that was a guy Ohio State had to turn to, if Emory did end up flipping, they're not going wrong there. The school, the coaches. Another interesting fact about Lake Travis, Chad Morris was kind of the guy that got it started and got his kind of offense instilled there or implemented there. Who's obviously the offensive coordinator or the head coach at SMU right now. So yeah, just a quarterback factory. If you're getting a quarterback from there, you're doing something right. They have really talented kids all the way across the board. So Ohio State wouldn't be hurting in that department if it had to turn to Matthew Baldwin.
All right, let's go ahead and turn now a little bit away from the quarterback talk to talk about some players that both Ohio State and Alabama have been recruiting. And when I say that, I'm talking about some big-name players. Obviously, both schools are recruiting the best in the country. 2 of the best in the country are defensive backs Patrick Surtain and Tyson Campbell from Florida. I don't think either one is likely to end up at Ohio State, but both have said that they are going to make official visits to Ohio State. What do you see with Surtain and Campbell, who Alabama is going after also? Yeah,
kind of similar. As far as Surtain, I've never really expected him to end up with Alabama. Similar to Ohio State, they both will likely take official visits to Alabama after their season. So it's worth watching. But the thing with Patrick Surtain is he's always been an LSU lean, and I don't see that changing, at least at this point. he's flirted with Alabama a little bit. He came up in the summer to their Champions Cookout and said they made a move for him. I think he likes Alabama. I just think he likes LSU more at this point. Tyson Campbell's one that I think Alabama has the best shot at out of the two. I mean, and out of the kind of the elite cornerbacks from the country, he's a guy they've really honed in on, and they really want to get in the class. People that don't really follow Alabama recruiting don't know that. I mean, Alabama has a lot. They're losing a lot in the secondary after this year. So any guy they sign in this class will likely have a chance to see the field early. And I mean, if they sign Tyson Campbell, I mean, he could be a guy that contributes from day one. So like Ohio State, Alabama will get him on an official visit. I know Miami and Georgia are kind of making a run for him as of late. So we'll see kind of what happens with there. I think the visits will play a huge role for him. And I think it'll be interesting to see if Tyson Campbell goes to Alabama or if he goes to Ohio State. I mean, if the visit goes really well for him there, what Patrick Surtain does, if they want to play together, if that changes anything with LSU. And on the flip hand, I mean, if Surtain does end up choosing LSU, if maybe Campbell takes a closer look at LSU, I think there's a lot that can go on. They're both teammates. They're friends. So we'll see what happens with those. But I think out of those two, Alabama has a better shot at Tyson Campbell at this point.
And then there's an elite offensive tackle, Nicholas Petit-Frere. You know, he's made official visits now to Michigan and Notre Dame. He was at the Michigan-Ohio State game on this official visit. Both schools have confidence that they could end up getting Petit-Frere. There's a good chance that he is going to make an official visit to Ohio State. Certainly the Ohio State does have one in that Greg Schiano, his kids went to the same high school that Petit-Frere goes to. But having said that, I'm not particularly confident the Buckeyes are going to get him. And I think he's more likely to go elsewhere. What do you see for Petit-Frere?
Yeah, you know, he's a quiet kid. He speaks about as highly as every school. I mean, he doesn't speak more highly on one school than another. So you can't really get a great gauge on him from him talking about schools when he does opt to talk. But I think Alabama's they're certainly in it for him. They got him on campus in April the last time. I know they expect to get him on campus for an official visit as well. The plan for Alabama is likely to they're probably only going to take one more offensive lineman. They've targeted Nicholas Petit-Frere and they've targeted Penei Sewell out of Utah. Two just really, I mean, they're both very talented offensive linemen, as the rankings would suggest. I've crystal balled Penei Sewell to Alabama, so I wouldn't project Petit-Frere in the class at this point. But what I have been told about him and from people that know him or are close to the recruitment, that he's a real process-oriented kid, and a lot of the kids like the structure. He's a kid that would probably thrive in the structure of Alabama. I mean, Nick Saban preaches the process, and that he's the type of the kid that would like that. That's not to say all these other programs, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Michigan, that they don't have that structure. But he's a Nick Saban type kid, I guess I should say. And I think that's probably Alabama's biggest selling point to him at this point. He's looking for obviously academics. He's a really smart kid. He's looking for that as well. So we'll see where he ends up going. But I mean, Alabama's in it. I think they're up there with Michigan and Notre Dame and Ohio State. I think they'll make their case when they get him on an official visit for later this fall or later this before the early signing period or in January.
Okay, and then that leaves one more to talk about, Brenton Cox. You know, he's committed to Ohio State, has been committed to Ohio State for a long time, has visited Alabama, has visited Georgia. There seems like a lot of confidence in the Georgia side of things that he's going to flip. Personally, I think he's going to stay with Ohio State. I'm not saying there's no chance that he flips, but I will be surprised if he does. I think the chances are high he stays with Ohio State. Your thoughts on Brenton Cox?
Yeah, another guy Alabama really likes. They've kind of turned up the heat on him this fall, especially. I mean, they've tried to get him on campus a few times. Were successful once. I can't remember which game it was, but it was in October, I believe, that he actually made the visit out. I think it was the Arkansas game when he came to see Alabama. But the Alabama outside linebackers coach Tosh Lupoi went and saw him earlier this week at Stockbridge. They're working to get him on campus for an official visit in the next few weeks. Obviously, he's an early enrollee, so kind of got to work quick. But I mean, if he takes that official visit, I mean, I think Alabama's really one to watch. I think they're still in it. Like you said, I mean, there's a lot of talk around Georgia flipping him staying home, staying in state. I think that's a very realistic possibility. But he does seem pretty firm with Ohio State at this point. I wouldn't, if I were making a class projection, I wouldn't project him to Alabama. I think they're certainly in it, and the fact that he's possibly willing to take an official visit here in the next couple of weeks shows that the interest is still there. So I mean, we'll see. It could be a fun one to follow down the stretch. But at this point, I don't see him flipping to Alabama. But you can't rule it out at this point. When Nick Saban's out on the road talking to these kids, I mean, it's not often. You know, Alabama. I've said this before. Alabama and Ohio State are very similar programs in that when they target somebody they want, they're more times than not they're not going to miss on them. So it's really worth watching when Nick Saban gets involved in the recruitment. Tosh Lupoy's obviously Alabama's top recruiter. He's their ace recruiter. So when he's getting involved, you got to keep an eye on it. But at this point, I don't see him flipping to Alabama just yet.
And finally, the composite rankings. Right now, Ohio State is, and they have been for quite some time, number one in the country for 2018 when it comes to the composite rankings, recruiting rankings. Alabama is checking in at number 24. You know, my thoughts right now are that if Ohio State lands the guys I think they're going to land, there's a very good chance that they're going to stay number one and break Alabama's streak, finish finally breaking that Tide streak with the number one class in the country for the Buckeyes. I think there's a pretty decent chance that happens. Again, providing they finish with the guys I think they will likely finish with. Alabama at number 24, quite different than they are used to. You know, what's your feeling where Alabama ultimately finishes in the 247 Sports composite rankings?
Yeah, you know, I think what's hurting Alabama right now, especially is numbers in their class. They have 11 commitments. If you look at their actual rating per commitment as 91.76, so I mean that's similar to the schools in the top 10, top 5 as far as rankings per commit. So certainly numbers are not helping them. They're going to sign at least 11 more guys. They're going to have a class of at least 22 come signing day. So I've said this on our board over at Bama Online that I think Bama will finish with the top 10 class. I mean that's easy to say. I mean they likely will with the guys they're targeting. Possibly top 5. I've not anticipated for a while now that they will take the number one class once again. Obviously, it would help if Alabama was able to flip Emory Jones and Brenton Cox from Ohio State and take down their numbers a little bit. But I mean, I don't think both of those will happen. I've projected Emory to flip, but I don't think Brenton will at this point to Alabama at least. So I don't anticipate Alabama finishing number one again this year. I think the best case scenario is a top 5 finish, maybe just right outside the top 5. They're going to have a very strong class. It's not one that Bama fans are used to. I mean, but I mean they've got some really high level guys they're going after that they hope to finish out the class with. And like you said, I mean if they finish with the guys that we think they're likely to finish with, it'll be a really strong year for Alabama again.
Well, great stuff, Hank. Hank and I have been friends for a number of years, and he covers Alabama and Alabama recruiting, does a super job for the Alabama 24/7 Sports site, and I appreciate having you on today, Hank, for the second ever DeanCast. Thanks, Hank.
No problem. Thank you, Bill.